Hi, everybody. Welcome back to our channel. I'm Kendra Fitzgerald, and this is my sister, Nicole Coons, right over there somewhere. And we are here for another sister chat, and we are so excited about today. We love doing these sister chats because we picture you guys in the room with us, and it's just fun to chat with your sister. So today we're talking about the 6 steps for preparing for birth and avoiding a traumatic experience. I think this might be one of the most important topics that we talk about in birth prep.
Yeah, I think this is one of the most important topics because as many women as there are giving birth is how many ways there are to prepare. So preparing for birth is a really personal thing. However, there are ways that being prepared looks different from being not prepared. And I think what we really want to help you discern and to figure out today is what do you need to do to be prepared and actually prepared and not just hoping for the best, because really hope is not a good strategy for birth.
Yeah. So we have 6 steps for you guys. Make sure you stay around for the 6th one because that is one that you probably have not heard before. So we really want to get that one to you. So why are we talking about this and us specifically? Nicole and I have 2 kids each, and so we've had 4 births between us, and we have a lot of personal experience that we bring to the table, along with the fact that we have helped hundreds of women go through their birth with preparation and feeling prepared so they can avoid that traumatic experience and have an ecstatic and joyful experience. So we want to pull together all of the information that we have learned from our own experience and from teaching other people to go through it as well and bring that to you today. All right, so let's get to the first one. So number 1 is check yourself.
Yes, check yourself. Okay, so what we mean by that, not check yourself body, what is your reason for preparing or not preparing or doing whatever version of preparation you're doing right now? Are you guiding yourself? Are you guided by fear, detachment, overwhelm? In other words, the less I know, the better off I'll be. Or if I know just enough, I'll be fine. Or are you going from the guiding principle of joy and connection? And what you might be saying to yourself in that case is the more intimate and connected I am to the experience, to my birth, to the process, the better off I will be. So just ask yourself which one of those is your guiding principle. And you might even check yourself when you're looking at the boards that you're a part of, looking at the articles that you're reading. Are you being guided to those articles and those discussions because of fear, overwhelm, worry, detachment? Like, okay, I just need to have a good doctor and that's it. Or are you really looking for the information in order to craft your experience and to put together a plan that feels like uniquely yours?
Number 2 is to choose a doctor or midwife that you love. And this is a super important one because that person is going to be helping you through the length of your pregnancy and then into childbirth and into the process of bringing your baby into the world. And so there's definitely some understanding that you have to have, and it's good to have a doctor or midwife who thinks along the same lines as you. And it's important to know what their policies are, what their thoughts are about the things that you want to have happen in your birth. And from a personal experience, my first birth was in quite a large practice of doctors, OB-GYNs. And I had one doctor and I saw her through my whole pregnancy. And then when it was time to give birth to my son, 2 o'clock in the morning, my husband called and to tell them that I was coming in. And they were like, oh, guess what? You're getting a different doctor in the same group. And it was the one doctor that I was a little bit scared about having. And I was like, what is happening here? And, I hadn't quite prepared for that. However, I had prepared enough to know what I wanted. So I could kind of override some of that anxiety about not seeing the doctor who had seen me up until the day before I was going to give birth. I had seen my regular doctor, and then now I'm thrown in with this other doctor. It worked out great because I knew what I wanted and I had preconceived kind of what I was going into. But you can definitely be thrown for a loop. But you want to pick a doctor who you know, and also in the practice, make sure that the doctors in the practice are also ones that you want to, that you would want to have deliver your baby also.
Absolutely. So finding a doctor who really allows you to ask the questions you want to ask and kind of supports the desires that you have, it does make a difference in your experience. And even if you know you're having a C-section, or even if you know you're going to use the epidural, the doctors and midwives that we've spoken to over the years, they prefer a mother who's knowledgeable about birth and who has a plan, has an idea, she knows herself, and she knows what she wants, versus a mother who puts all of the onus on them. There are a few doctors who will just gladly say, like, I've got you. However, there's a lot that could go wrong, and they may not have you until later in the birth process. So we're going to talk about that later, what you can do. But definitely having a doctor that backs you up on your desires is key. And if not, don't be afraid to change. We had a mom in one of our immersions a few years ago who was 37 weeks, and she changed her doctor, hired a doula, and had an amazing birth experience, all because she took some action to choose a doctor that really aligned with her.
All right, number 3 is getting familiar with your environment and knowing where you're going to give birth, whether that's at home, in the hospital, in a birthing center. And we know in the time of COVID, that can be very different. So, Nicole, why don't you talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, so normally in normal times, we might say go to the hospital and take a tour. That might not be possible right now, but maybe there are ways to look on their website and look for pictures of the rooms that you're going to be in and find out if those pictures are like the actual pictures of the rooms, right? You can do a little homework, you can do a little scouring and find out, because having a visual image is going to help you make the unfamiliar familiar, which is going to help with some of that physiology of birth that we're going to talk about later. Also, a good thing to look for in your hospital or birthing center are things like, what are the rates of epidural use? What are the rates of C-section? Do they have equipment to help you during your birth if you are choosing birth balls, showers, tubs, bars, all these other things, like what is going to be available. Also, find out if it's a teaching hospital or if it's not, because that can also impact your birth plan, right? So lots of things to learn about your environment that are going to help you feel more confident to navigate your birth despite all the things around you. And now in COVID times, it's really important to also keep abreast, which I'm sure you already are, but make sure you're keeping abreast, because the regulations and the rules are changing sometimes weekly, in terms of who's allowed and what the protocols are for birthing or laboring mother at the hospital. So be sure to keep checking those stats out for your hospital.
Number 4 is prepare your birth plan with a focus on how, the quality of the experience, how you want to feel, not what you're going to do, but how you're going to feel after the experience is over. This is such an important one. They're all important, but this is an important one.
Yes. Now, this one, I really want to spend a minute on this one, because this is what can make the difference between a traumatizing birth and a birth that you're totally fine with. And here's the other thing to know about a traumatizing birth is that two women can have the exact same experience, and one of them experiences it as traumatic and the other experiences it as a fine birth. Okay, so what makes the difference? Okay, trauma happens when we're in a situation and we feel helpless, out of control, overtaken by fear and or freezing, right? Getting into a situation where we feel stuck and not able to move through that. So we can absolutely avoid these things if we know how to prepare correctly and fully. So I kind of think of birth preparation in like 2 levels, right? So the first level is like the typical level that we all do. You can get from a book, you can get from a lot of videos here on YouTube of like, what are the basics of birth? Like, the phases and the stages, and what is my body doing and what is my baby doing, and all these things. All of your typical things, including even what are like some of the interventions, are epidurals and episiotomy and forceps and vacuum delivery, like all these things, right? These are all typical preparation and really good, absolutely good and useful level of preparation. The second level of preparation is what we want to encourage you to really take on. And that is, creating a plan that is not just, I want this, I don't want this, but really having a plan as if everything is possible. Okay. And what that looks like is, if you have an epidural, I want it to be like, I want to feel this way. I want to be supported in this way. In other words, do you want to be told, all the step by step, the play by play, or do you just want to be reassured? Do you just want to have, who do you want to have in the room? Who do you not want to have in the room? What do you want the environment of the room to be like? What how much information do you want about what the doctor is doing or not? How much do you not want to know? Do you only want to know if things go wrong, or do you want to know everything? Right. So talking about that, that's a great kind of dialogue to have with your doctor. Like, how much are you willing to like tell me what's happening? Or you can ask questions, practice asking questions at your doctor's appointment. So you get in this habit and this relationship with your doctor about a dialogue, if that's what comforts you. So, what's the difference for a mom who does the basic level of planning versus a mom who does the second level of planning in regards to trauma? Here's the difference. A mother who is prepared with all the possibilities, including even a C-section, even if you, in your like farthest reaches of your mind, you don't want a C-section, or if you can't imagine going into natural labor, but you're planning a C-section and you haven't planned for the spontaneous onset of labor, it works in any case. A mother who is knowledgeable and who has a plan for every little outcome in terms of not what she wants or doesn't want, but in terms of how you want to feel, what is going to make you feel supported. And you've addressed that for all of those possibilities. What this creates is a mother who is flexible. And the doctors love mothers who are knowledgeable and flexible. You're able to actually respond to the actual labor that you're having, not some idealized version that is made up in a story, or you want to have a birth like hers or avoid a birth like hers, that you're actually showing up moment by moment and attending to your birth as it is. And when you go in that direction, you are so much less likely to have a traumatic experience. Why? Because you're not feeling helpless. You're not feeling out of control, and you're feeling very in charge, or at least arm in arm with your doctors and your team, your support team that's there with you. And this is what makes the difference in having a really positive and joyful birth experience over one that's driven by fear, detachment, victimization. And we don't want that for you. We want you to have the ability to have an empowered birth. Truly, an empowered birth can be a C-section birth, an epidural-based birth, a vaginal birth, a car birth, whatever, whatever kind of home birth, whatever kind of birth you want. That having a plan and knowing what makes you feel supported, regardless of what turns your birth takes, makes you flexible, adaptable, and a truly empowered mom. So this is what we want for you. So are you ready to know how? We're going to tell you, the last 2 points are going to tell you how to really get into this place of taking your knowledge, got to do that, to the next level of how do I actually be empowered in my birth and a participant, an active participant, so that I have a great experience. And you know what? Your doctor is going to love you for being so flexible, so on board, so in tune, and so ready for your birth. So do it. If you care about your doctor, you love your doctor, right? Like, you can also be the great person, the great patient for them. And that's what we want to empower you with.
And I'll add,
Yeah.
it helps them do their job better.
Yeah.
If you're prepared, it helps them do their job better. They can be a better doctor to you if you're bringing the same amount of preparation to the table as they are. Same for the
Yeah.
nurses too, because really it's the nurses that you're going to see when you first go into the hospital. Your doctor is probably going to be there at the very end. We're going to talk about this a little bit more, but it's really the nurses that you're interacting with for the hours, minutes, maybe hours, lots of hours before you actually have the baby. And they will appreciate your preparation as well.
Yeah. So this is a great analogy. And Kendra and I were chatting before we came live. And, it's like, imagine you're a Broadway star and you were going to go on camera or on stage, and you were like the star of the show, right? You had like the lead role. You're the one who's like going to make everybody cry and everybody laugh and everybody have a good time. And you show up, and all you've done is like read the lines and like put on the costume, but you haven't actually prepared your delivery. You have no idea how you're going to actually connect with, and be there in present time and delivering and responding to the people and responding to the beauty of Broadway, right? Which is that live component. Birth is live, right?
Yeah.
So,
and if you haven't practiced getting into character, you have to get into character in order to do it on the day of the show. So what happens if you don't do that?
Right. So you got to prepare yourself, like not just fill your head with knowledge, because honestly, you know what happens? Your thinking brain shuts off in labor. You don't actually have access to a lot of that stuff. It's all your primitive, your instinctual brain. And your emotional brain, which is that inside brain, which is connected to our emotions and our feelings. So this is why it's important to address in your plan, how do you feel, not just what you want from your thinking brain, your logical brain. I'm doing this because there's this cool analogy about the brain. We'll do it in another video. To help you, understand the impact of trauma and how we use our brain to kind of navigate what's happening and how we can navigate stressful situations. Yeah.
That's so
Okay.
cool.
So
check out that video right up here.
yeah.
So the moral of that story is make your birth like you're going to be a Broadway star. You need to prepare for your birth as much as you would as if you were showing up as the star of a Broadway show. And that's a lot of preparation,
Yeah.
right?
I love that.
Step number 5 is get your body ready for both intensity and rest. Super important because there is a combination of both in birth. Yes, of course, we think about birth as being intense, but that's what we see on TV, right? Birth is like intense 100% of the time.
Right.
I tell you, that's not the truth. That's not what happens. I think it's like 50 to 70% of the time is actually spent in rest, which is crazy, but it's a different kind of rest. It's not like lay down and take a nap and, go to sleep. But it can be productive rest, and it has to be productive rest in order for the time that you have that intensity to be productively intense and not traumatic.
Right.
Right. So think about your mind and body as you're preparing for a marathon, right? Because birth really is a marathon. It's not a sprint. For some people it might be, but even that, it's still a marathon. And you have to prepare your body and your mind for that marathon. And birth is a physical and an emotional event, and it can definitely has physiological effects, emotional effects, mental effects. We're really operating from a primitive place in birth. It's what you don't see in movies. It's like the high-pitched scream is not really primitive. Primitive is that low moan and the, getting into your primitive nature of being a mammal, right? Of being a birthing mother.
Yeah.
And, operating from that place looks and feels really different for every woman. And it will probably look very different for the people who are standing outside of you, like your partner. May not realize what's going on, but what you are doing internally and in your physical body is the ingrained nature of a primitive mammal giving birth. And so we have to condition our body for the demands of labor. And just like Nicole said before, even if you plan on having an epidural or you plan on having a C-section, those are all great. You also have to prepare for the fact that you might go into spontaneous labor and you might have to deal with these, these sensations and surges and what your brain starts to tell you at home for 10 hours. Say, it's a snowstorm and you can't get to the hospital, and then suddenly you're stuck and you don't have the tools. We want you to have the tools and the mental and the physical preparation for it. So the first component of that is obviously the strength. We do need a lot of strength. We need a lot of muscular strength to get us through those hours upon hours of using our muscles. I tell you, after my first, I spent so long in a squat and like rocking side to side. I felt like I ran a marathon afterwards because my legs were like, what the hell did you just do to me? But it was seriously like, it was a 7-hour labor and I probably spent 5 hours doing squats.
Yeah.
Like, that's a marathon. That's more than a marathon.
You definitely want to train for that. You do not want to do, I know, like when I first got stationary bike, I hopped on, I was like, I'm going to go for a ride. I felt awesome. I couldn't walk for days that first time because it was so intense. But this is the thing, like we need to warm our bodies up. We need to prepare. And that was like a 30-minute thing. Like it was not 5 hours. So absolutely the strength component is essential.
Yeah. And I'll add too, the strength component, it's kind of like the ultimate Tabata workout, because you're on for a minute, you're off for 5. You're on for a minute, you're off for 5. So that interval training is so important when you're pregnant. I can totally do a whole thing about this.
I love that analogy. It's so true because, I think we overlook our ability to relax, especially nowadays when we think relaxing is like on our phones and we're like doing distraction. It's different from relaxation.
Yeah. And so you have this intensity, and in Tabata workouts, the whole idea is that you go really intensely for a short amount of time. You get a lot of productive strength, and then you rest. You completely stop. right? And that productive rest helps you go faster the next time you go, which is the same in birth. The more you rest, the more productive you can be. It's the same with muscle engagement. You know, you can only engage as much as you rest. It's the same thing in labor. And I love that all of this connects. It's so great. So the second part of this, getting your body ready, is the ability to relax, like truly relax. And you know, labor contraction time versus time spent between contractions, I think it was like 50 to 70% of the time you're going to end up spending in rest. So unless you're having like back labor, or you know, the baby is not in the right position, or you're having like pain outside of the contractions, in between those contractions, it's pure rest. And let me tell you, it is bliss. Bliss. Because the contraction goes away, and the contractions definitely ebb and flow, you know, like they go to a crescendo and then they come back down. And it's like, you know, you're on the other side of that, and then you can fully rest. And it's like feeling the contradiction between that intensity and then the rest. You can prepare yourself for that intensity. But if you haven't trained for that yet, you're going to stay, like you're going to go up to that labor point and then like stay up here and be like, oh crap, the next one's coming, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, and you're not going to be able to rest, and then you won't have the strength to continue. And that's when interventions start happening and the cascade starts happening from there. So you wanted to talk a little bit more about rest, right?
Yeah, well, actually, I want to talk about rest and strength in the form of, or through the lens of, your positions. So another part of preparing your body for labor is preparing yourself with knowledge of the positions that make birth easier, like literally easier. There are certain positions that make birth easier, and there are certain positions that make birth, that slow it down, that impede it even. Just know that educating yourself on the positions that you're going to give birth in, that you're going to labor in, and even ride in the car to the hospital in, or the birthing center if you're leaving your home, that these things really do make a difference, and let that be part of your body preparation. And it applies to both strength. So what postures do you want to be in when you are having a contraction, when you're feeling that wave, and what positions are best for resting in and for allowing the body to truly regenerate. So body is key.
This brings us to step 6, which is prepare your mind for focus and resilience. And just like preparing your body, you have to prepare your mind too. And, you know, what's going on in your mind during labor can have an impact on your physical response in your body and the chemical response in your body too, which can completely change the outcome of your birth.
Yes, actually, I'm going to jump on that second one first, that mental state and how that impacts the physiology and the chemistry in your body. So you really need the main hormone you need in labor is oxytocin, right? Oxytocin is the love hormone. Guess what? The other hormone that could appear is adrenaline. Now, adrenaline does have a role in labor at the end, like when you get to pushing phase, but adrenaline is actually inversely related to oxytocin. So guess what? If you're in a mental state where you feel fearful, frozen, stuck, right? All those things we talked about earlier, that trauma response that you want to get out, you want to bail, you want to freeze, you want to hide. All of these responses actually increase adrenaline, slowing oxytocin down, and thereby slowing your labor down as a protective mechanism. Your body doesn't want to birth baby in a scary environment when like little baby tigers are coming at you from all directions, even though they're imaginary, or you know, it's just the beeping sound of the monitor is giving you anxiety, right? Or you don't have something else, and you don't have something else to listen to. Small example, but this is how our body and our mind, if we're not keeping the mind in check and becoming aware of all these things that could potentially take our mind off track, that can take your birth off track. So how do you train the mind for focus and resilience? And by resilience, what we mean is that you're able to go with the flow, right? You're able to take what's coming at you and respond. So it's not a reaction out of fear or detachment or victimization. It's a response in which you've received the information. Maybe you can take a breath. That's the ideal, is that you're able to take a breath and then respond. So this takes practice. If you have pets or you have other small children at home, this is a great training ground for taking time to respond versus react, right? You have something that like pushes your button, and can you take a breath? you probably just took a breath with me, and then respond, right? Something as subtle as that can really shift how your mind is operating, because taking a deep breath is something that doesn't happen when you're in the fear response. When you're running from a tiger, you're not breathing deeply. So taking a deep breath, you can essentially, that's the switch to get out of the adrenaline surge and back into moving toward the oxytocin surge again, right? So deep breathing, number one. The benefit of deep breathing is it also helps you focus your mind. So if you can keep your focus on your breath over multiple breaths in a row and practice this regularly, daily, ideally, then you will develop strength in your mental focus and your mental resilience, your ability to respond from that place of adrenaline, from that place of oxytocin and love and connection to yourself, versus fear and detachment. Okay, so
Yeah,
how do you
I
do
love
this?
that.
Yeah,
I love that. And it makes so much sense that this is the reason why we practice yoga,
that's
because
right.
just like we talked before about the fact that you have to prepare your body, but how do you prepare for using your breath when you're having an adrenaline response to something? If you've never done it before, it's going to be really hard, especially if you're in a position that you've never done something before, which most of us, the first time we give birth is a very different experience. And
Yeah,
asking yourself to try to calm yourself down without having practice is challenging. But using the practice of yoga, putting your body in these different positions, slightly stressing your muscles and getting, putting yourself in a place of like holding a position for a certain amount of time. And like what happens when you start to feel that adrenaline rush, you can practice how you respond with your breath. And then you can recall that during your birth. It is an incredibly powerful experience.
yeah,
And just from a personal perspective, of both of my births, I mean, Nicole you're my sister, but you helped me through both of my births. I would not have been able to have two unmedicated births without you. And
yeah,
it was, it was Nicole's prenatal teaching that got me to understand the connection between what are you feeling in your body? Can you relate those feelings in your body and the stress that you might be starting to have mount because you're doing something that feels slightly uncomfortable or maybe
yeah,
really uncomfortable? And what's the response that your body is having? And can you recondition it to react a different way so that when you're in the moment, you can recall what you were doing on your mat and be like, I can do this because I've done this before. And
yeah.
then it becomes easier.
Right, making that unfamiliar familiar again. So your breath, I can't tell you how many moms who practice with me for their full pregnancy and preparation for birth, and they've done the partner work that I do with moms and partners, and they always report back like, God, that breath and that mind focus, I never realized how important that was, but that's what got me through. So don't miss this. Don't miss this opportunity to build this skill, and it will help you even in motherhood, of course, right? The ability to take a breath before you respond and to be able to manage and handle the twists and turns as they come, because they will. Just expect the twists and turns. And what we're really preparing for is how you show up. We want you showing up as your best self so you can have the best birth for you.
With these 6 steps that we've just given you to prepare for your birth, do the work. Now it's on you to do the work of preparing and don't show up unprepared for birth. You have no excuse, right? At this point, we've given you all of the tips. When you don't prepare, it makes everyone's job harder, especially yours. So follow these 6 steps, show up for your birth as the star of the show, informed, empowered, and even joyful. And we are here to support you through every step of the way. If you are looking for a way to physically practice these steps, come join us in the Devoted Mamas Prenatal Club. There is a free trial, so you can come and join us and take a couple of free classes, a huge library of classes that you can practice with on demand on your own time. And we take you through the steps. We do the practice with you so that when you get to birth, you know what to do when you're asked to show up. And that's what we want for you, is to have a joyful, empowered experience. Thanks so much for joining us. It's been so much fun to do the sister chat. And make sure you like this video, subscribe below, and click the notification button to make sure that you're notified every time we launch a new video. We'd love to hear from you. Comment in the boxes below. What is one thing that we talked about today that you are going to work on over the next week to create the birth plan that's going to work for you? We'd love to hear it. And we always respond to our comments. So if you have a question for us, you can also ask questions in the comments below too. We'll see you soon. Thanks so much for watching.